Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us across the fence. I'm Keith Silva, in for Fran Stoddard. This year marks the 75th anniversary of the Proctor Maple Research Center located in Underhill. The Proctor Maple Research Center has been the leader in a basic and applied research of maple trees and maple syrup production since its founding. The land for the center was donated to UVM by Vermont Governor Mortimer Proctor. At a small picnic to dedicate the site, Governor Proctor stated that he wanted UVM scientists and researchers to link industry and agriculture in order to further understand and promote what he called the aristocrat of sweets. Across the Fence has produced this video that traces the Proctor Center's origins, current research, and looks ahead at the future of maple.
Maple is the window on agriculture. Without the Proctor Center, the maple industry in Vermont wouldn't be what it is.
Proctor Center sits on a conventional northern hardwoods forest. You have sugar maple, of course, and then you have beech and yellow birch. We're 1,300 to 1,500 feet or so in elevation, starting to see a little bit of spruce and fir creep in as we go higher in elevation.
The thing that oftentimes producers think is that we're in an area that's a super great area for maple, and it isn't. There's nothing in terms of the forests or the land that's particularly special. It's special because of the research that's done and the people who are here, but it represents a pretty typical forest in Vermont.
Maple research at UVM has been ongoing since the 1800s. There has been a long history of both basic and applied research on maple tree physiology, maple syrup production that has been going on at UVM and since the birth of the Proctor Center 75 years ago.
Really, one of the founding principles of this property was the fact that there needed to be a space large enough to do the type of research that's important for producers. This was an old hill farm. The Harvey farm existed before UVM was given this land. It was probably a tough place to grow crops, but having a dedicated property that could be used for ongoing research was really critical, and that was one of the big motivations that Jim Marvin and Fred Taylor had for establishing this property.
My name is David Marvin, and I'm the founder of Butternut Mountain Farm. My father, James Marvin, was the founder of the Proctor Maple Research Center with Dr. Taylor. The center itself was called the Proctor Maple Research Farm at that time. There was a sugar house and a small building that resembles a fishing shanty somewhat, where the recording instruments were kept. And I remember many springs going up, riding on the dray as the buckets were gathered behind the sugar house. Dad said that what he really wanted to do is to have a place that expressed the reality of sugaring with their experiments so that people would believe in the work that they were doing because they actually were sugaring themselves.
The work that I do today is based on and builds upon the work of everyone that has come here before me. So one person I think of in particular, of course, is Dr. Maria Franca Morcelli. She was really the first to look at what are the potential impacts of concentrating sap with reverse osmosis on the quality and the composition and the flavor of the syrup produced. She was doing that work in the 70s and early 80s, and here I am in the 2000s doing very similar work at a different scale, but building upon the work that she and her colleagues began.
I'm Sam Cutting IV, and we're here at Dakin Farm. It's my family business. My dad pretty much started it. He bought a little roadside stand called Dakin Farm Maple Market. I did take one class with Dr. Morcelli, and I heard some of this from my father too, and I know how much he respected her. Here's this Italian woman that has this pretty strong accent, who's a scientist, in there with all these sugar makers that have all their perceptions of how things should be done. They saw that she was a real person and that she really cared about the industry and what she could contribute to it to make it a better industry, more successful, more efficient, and a better quality product.
Vermont produces over 50% of the U.S. crop. We are already tops in terms of production in the U.S., and so it should be no surprise that we are tops in terms of research as well.
Maple is unique. You know, it has a very short period of time when you're actually harvesting the crop. It's not like another ag crop where you have a whole growing season to see how things are progressing. It's really condensed to a 6-8 week period. Once the season is over, the research season is over.
One of the secrets to Proctor's success is that we're sugar makers too. So that is the best way to become familiar with what are the important questions that need to be studied, things that are unanswered, things that will be helpful. So basically to walk the walk in order to also be able to talk the talk.
Yield is sort of the common denominator for maple producers. They really want to hear, how can I make the process better? How can I get more out of my tree while maintaining the sustainability of the process?
It's yields that are sustainable over time. If you can take 2, 3, 4 times as much of something, we always want to know what is the impact to the tree as a result. We are looking at that. It's a long-term project to understand how modern sugaring impacts sustainability. It's not something that can be answered overnight.
Maple syrup production is a very important part of our mission here, and so we do engage in production each year. Some of that is for science, but some of it is also to understand the process. About half of our production goes to UVM campus, where it's served in the dining halls and sold in the UVM bookstore. The other half is sold to a packer who packs the product along with maple syrup from hundreds of other producers around the state.
It has been a long-standing mission to have research, demonstration, and education. Within Extension, there was something started about 50 years ago called the Vermont Maple Schools. Ray Foulds, who was the Extension forester, worked with the Sugar Makers Association to do essentially county-based education for maple producers. It has basically morphed into what we now call the Vermont Maple Conferences. And it's always a mix of researchers speaking with producers, sharing their knowledge, other maple producers sharing with other maple producers. And so that education component has been there throughout.
The outreach component keeps us relevant. It keeps us out there understanding what the issues are. We could go off and do some really esoteric work for our entire career that might influence half a dozen people, but with the work that we do here, we touch thousands and thousands of people, and we know that it changes practice. We know that it increases their economic viability, and that is very important in maintaining the forest. If the forests aren't viable economically, then it's going to change. By going out and teaching producers various things, they can make a better life for themselves, they can make a better product.
Proctor Maple has meant a lot to this business. My name is Jenna Baird, and this is my partner Jacob Pausner. We're here at the Baird Farm in Chittenden, Vermont. It's a 4th generation family farm, and we tap around 14,000 maple trees. We do a lot of agritourism on our farm, so we teach folks from New Jersey, Massachusetts, New York, you name it, all about maple sugaring. And I really think people care where their food is coming from. They really care about who's making it and how it's made.
Maple is a competitive space, and farming in general is tough. You know, it's tough margins, and you're at the beck and call of the weather. And so we want the tools and the knowledge that Proctor provides to be able to compete on a level that we never would before.
When I came to Dakin Farm, there was this slogan, Vermont maple syrup, the world's best. Well, how do you back that up? Proctor Maple Research Center just stands out as a partner that has helped us maintain our reputation as having the world's best maple syrup. It's really a 3-legged stool. Proctor, the Agency of Ag, and the maple industry. So the industry is the practitioners that are out there in the field putting everything to work. The agency tries to back us up, and we need strong maple people in the Agency of Agriculture. And then Proctor is just the science and the practical knowledge And we work together so well. It's not just a classroom or a lab up in the mountains. It is an incredible partner, and it always has been.
We're working with a plant that lives 150, 250, sometimes 350 years old. We don't know all that much about it. When you think we've only been here as Europeans or immigrants to this country for less than one rotation of maple. There is a magic and a mystery to maple that is still there, and despite all the great work, there's a lot we don't know. Proctor is critical to learning that.
Climate change is an issue that's hard to deal with. If we look back in the records, we can tell that from the 70s up to about now, the season has shifted by at least a week or maybe a week and a half, and it's also compressed a little bit. The question is, how is it going to affect us in the future? And the real answer is we don't know for sure, because we can't be sure how much the climate is going to change and how quickly it's going to change.
Long-term climate and weather, those are really essential for us to understand how this whole process works, and how that whole process works is very essential to be able to understand how it's going to be impacted as the climate changes and we see differences in how our winters are, the occurrence of freeze-thaw events, which we are dependent on to be able to harvest sap.
In the very long run, it's likely the season is going to shift considerably towards earlier in the calendar year. Whether or not we can extend it or keep it from shrinking any more than it has is really the question. The answer isn't clear yet, but it's something that we are concerned about and will continue to look at. 75 years ago, some of the fundamental questions they were asking were about why sap flows in maple and how it flows in maple. While we know a lot of the answers and some of the details, some of the really fine details are still elusive. And so we're trying to get slightly better answers to those questions and just understand in detail a little bit more. And it's kind of romantic in a way that we don't fully understand all the mysteries of the maple.